In the Orchard by Virginia Woolf. Miranda slept in the orchard, lying in a long chair beneath the apple tree. Her book had fallen into the grass, and her finger still seemed to point at the sentence, Ce pays est vraiment un des coins du monde où les rêves des vieux élatent les mieux. Then, when the breeze blew, her purple dress rippled like a flower attached to a stalk. The grass nodded, and the white butterfly came blowing this way and that, just above her face. 4 feet in the air over her head the apples hung. Suddenly there was a shrill clamour, as if they were gongs of cracked brass beaten violently, irregularly and brutally. It was only the school children saying the multiplication table in unison, stopped by the teacher, scolded, and beginning to say the multiplication table over again. But this clamour passed 4 feet above Miranda's head, went through the apple boughs, and striking against the cowman's little boy, who was picking blackberries in the hedge when he should have been at school, made him tear his thumb on the thorns. Next there was a solitary cry, sad, human, brutal. Old Parsley was indeed blind drunk. Then the very topmost leaves of the apple tree, flat like little fish against the blue, 30 feet above the earth, chimed with a pensive and lugubrious note. It was the organ in the church playing one of hymns ancient and modern. The sound floated out and was cut into atoms by a flock of fieldfares flying at an enormous speed. Somewhere or other, Miranda lay asleep 30 feet beneath. Then above the apple tree and the pear tree, 200 feet above Miranda, lying asleep in the orchard, bells thudded, intermittent, sullen, didactic. For 6 poor women of the parish were being churched, and the rector was returning, thanks to heaven. And above that was a sharp squeak. The golden feather of the church tower turned from south to east. The wind changed. Above everything else, it droned above the woods, the meadows, the hills, miles above Miranda lying in the orchard, asleep. It swept on, eyeless, brainless, meeting nothing that could stand against it, until, wheeling the other way, it turned south again. Miles below, in a space as big as the eye of a needle, Miranda stood upright and cried aloud, "Oh, I shall be late for tea." Miranda slept in the orchard, or perhaps she was not asleep, for her lips moved very slightly as if they were saying, Ce pays est vraiment un des coins du monde où les rires des vieux éclatent, éclatent, éclatent. And then she smiled and let her body sink all its weight onto the enormous earth, which rises, she thought, to carry me on its back as if I were a leaf or a queen. Here the children said the multiplication table. Or, Miranda went on, I might be lying on the top of a cliff with the gulls screaming above me. The higher they fly, she continued, as the teacher scolded the children and rapped Jimmy over the knuckles till they bled, the deeper they look into the sea. Into the sea, she repeated, and her fingers relaxed and her lips closed gently as if she were floating on the sea. And then, when the shout of the drunken man sounded overhead, she drew breath with an extraordinary ecstasy, for she thought that she heard life itself crying out from a rough tongue in a scarlet mouth, from the wind, from the bells, from the curved green leaves of the cabbages. Naturally, she was being married when the organ played the tune from hymns ancient and modern, and when the bells rang after the 6 poor women had been churched, the sullen, intermittent thud made her think that the very earth shook with the hooves of the horse that was galloping towards her. Ah, I have only to wait, she sighed. And it seemed to her that everything had already begun moving, crying, riding, flying round her, across her, towards her in a pattern. Mary is chopping the wood, she thought. Pierman is herding the cows. The carts are coming up from the meadows. The rider, and she traced out the lines of the men, the carts, the birds, and the rider made over the countryside until they all seemed driven out, round and across by the beat of her own heart. Miles up in the air the wind changed. The golden feather of the church tower squeaked, and Miranda jumped up and cried, "Oh, I shall be late for tea." Miranda slept in the orchard. Or was she asleep? Or was she not asleep? Her purple dress stretched between the 2 apple trees. There were 24 apple trees in the orchard, some slanting slightly, others growing straight with a rush up the trunk, which spread wide into branches and formed into round red or yellow drops. Each apple tree had sufficient space. The sky exactly fitted the leaves. When the breeze blew, the line of the boughs against the wall slanted slightly and then returned. A wagtail flew diagonally from one corner to another. Cautiously hopping, a thrush advanced towards a fallen apple. From the other wall, a sparrow fluttered just above the grass. The uprush of the trees was tied down by these movements. The whole was compacted by the orchard walls. For miles beneath the earth was clamped together, rippled on the surface with wavering air, and across the corner of the orchard the blue-green was slit by a purple streak. The wind changing, one bunch of apples was tossed so high that it blotted out 2 cows in the meadow. "Oh, I shall be late for tea," cried Miranda, and the apples hung straight across the wall again.